All right, so we're going to learn about solving absolute value equations today. So we're going to look up here first. If the absolute value of x equals 7, what are the possible values of x? Remember when we plug in anything to an absolute value, it has to come out positive. So here the x could be 7 or negative 7, because if we put in the negative 7 in here, the absolute value of negative 7 still comes out positive 7, right? And the absolute value of 7 comes out 7. Okay. If the absolute value of x equals negative 4, what are the possible values of x? None. Okay, the absolute value of a number can never be negative. So even though we can plug in a negative into an absolute value, we'll always get a positive number. If we plug in anything here, it doesn't matter. If we plug in a negative 4, it's going to come out positive 4. And if we plug in a positive 4, it's going to come out positive 4. So there's no solution here. Okay? The absolute value of 4 equals 4, not negative 4, ever. So this is no solution. There's no possible values of x there. So let's look at the steps to solve absolute value equations. The first thing we're going to do is isolate the absolute value expression, which means get it alone. Okay? Think of being isolated. You're alone. Okay, so you want to get the absolute value by itself. Then you're going to create two cases. You're going to set the inside equal to both positive and negative value of the number on the outside of the equal sign. Solve and then check. We have to check for extraneous solutions. Okay, so what are extraneous solutions? Solutions that do not work in the original equation. So sometimes you're going to plug in your answers back into your equation and it's not going to work. So it's going to be a false statement. It's going to be something like this, where you have like something equals a negative 4 and it's not going to work out, okay? So let's start. The first thing we do is we isolate the absolute value expression. It means we get it alone on one side of the equation. This absolute value of x minus 9 is by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. Okay? It's one side of the equal sign. So we're done there. So we did number 1. Number 2, create two cases. This is what that means by two cases. We're going to have one of the exact same pieces, except without the absolute value. So x minus 9 equals 5. Just like this. Just take away the absolute value. The other one is going to be x minus 9 equals negative 5. You're going to change the sign. You're going to leave the absolute value the same on both sides, but one's going to be a positive 5 and one's going to be a negative 5. And then you're going to solve for each. So the first thing we do to solve for x on this side is to add 9 to both sides. See, I told you solving equations never goes away. So we have x equals 14. That's one of our answers. And then over here we add 9 to both sides. So x equals 4. Okay, we're not done because we just solved both equations, but now we need to check for extraneous solutions to make sure both of these work. All we're going to do is plug 14 back in and 4 back in. If we get 5 for both of our answers, then they both work and those are both our answers. Okay, so we're going to check by plugging in. So to the original equation. So this is the original equation. I'm going to plug in 14 to x. So because that's what I got for one of my x's. So 14 minus 9 is 5. So is the absolute value of 5 5? Yes. So that means that 14 works. Let's plug in 4. If we plug in 4 to x, 4 minus 9 is negative 5, but the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Remember, anything in the absolute value comes out positive. So 5 equals 5, yep. So that means that both of those are our answers. Now this is how we write it. We do these squiggly lines. They're called set notation. So we have to write it like this. Our answer is the set of 4 and 14, and then end the set, and that's your answer for x. All right, number 3. Remember we isolate first. It's already isolated. It's alone by itself on one side, the absolute value. So now we're going to split it into two pieces. One is exactly the same. One has a negative 3. So that stays the same, and then negative 3, and then positive 3, and then we solve. So we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. So negative 4 equals 2k, and then divide by 2, and then negative 2 equals k. That's one of ours. And then we're going to subtract 7 again from both sides. So we have negative 10 equals 2k, divide by 2, and then negative 5 equals k. Then we need to plug both of those back in to check. So, I mean, you could do this, if you could do it in your head, you could do it in your head. But if you feel like you can't, please write it down. I'm just showing you my work here, but like if you say, okay, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 7 is a 3. So that works. If you could do that, that's fine. But if not, write it out. So like that's negative 4, right? This means multiplying, so you have to multiply. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 7 is 3. And 3 equals 3, so that works. So now I'm going to check if I plugged in negative 5. So if k was negative 5, well, 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. And negative 10 plus 7 is negative 3. The absolute value of a negative number, or any number, is always positive. So that works too. So that means both of our answers work. So we have negative 5 and a negative 2. Okay, number 5. We need to isolate first. This is not alone. So first we need to subtract 17 from both sides. Okay, so we have the absolute value of y minus 1 equals 6. Now we can split it off into two pieces. So y minus 1 equals 6 and y minus 1 equals negative 6. One is always positive, one is always negative. What's inside the absolute value stays the same. So we're going to solve each of these. So we're going to add 1 to both sides, so y equals 7. Add 1 to both sides, so y equals negative 5. Those are our possible two answers. Plug them back in to check. So one of my y's is 7, so 7 minus 1 equals 6. 7 minus 1 is 6, and then the absolute value of 6 is 6, so that works. And then we're going to plug in negative 5. So negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6, and the absolute value of a negative number comes out positive. So 6 equals 6. So both of them work. So our answer is negative 5 and 7, because both of those are true. And so we're going to write them both there. Number 6. Okay, look at number 6. We need to isolate this first. We just need to get the absolute value alone. Why is it not alone? Because of this 3. This 3 is multiplying this, which means we need to do the opposite to get rid of it, which means we need to divide. So those 3's cancel out on the left-hand side, and we're left with the absolute value of m plus 8 equals 13. Now we can split it off into 2. So m plus 8 equals 13, and m plus 8 equals negative 13, and then solve for m. So minus 8 from both sides, and then the other one minus 8 from both sides. Okay, so our two answers are 5 and negative 21. So let's check. If we plug in 5 to m, we have to remember we always do grouping symbols first. Order of operations is coming back. So do 5 plus 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. The absolute value of 13 is just 13, right? Anything in an absolute value comes out positive, and we're multiplying these two. So 3 times 13 is 39. So that checks out. So 5 is one of our answers, and then we need to check negative 21. So I'm going to plug in negative 21. Negative 21 plus 8 is negative 13. The absolute value of negative 13 is positive 13. So I'm multiplying those. Again, the 3 times 13, which is 39. So both of them work. So those are our two answers. Again, we have a 16 outside of the absolute value, so we need to divide by 16 first. That cancels out. Okay, so now those cancel. Negative 32 divided by 16 is negative 2, and we just have r minus 5 in the absolute values. Now look at this. Imagine if you were to do all this work for no reason. Why is it for no reason? Because look what the absolute value equals. It equals a negative. An absolute value can never equal a negative number. So isn't that nice? You're done. Please notice that if that happens, because you'll save yourself so much time when it equals a negative. There's nothing we can plug in here and then take the absolute value of it to make it a negative number. It always comes out positive. So this is not ever possible. It's no solution. All right, cool. So number 8. Again, we need to get this alone. So we're going to times both sides by negative 2. That means that those two negative 2's cancel, and we're left with the absolute value of y minus 10 equals negative 6 times negative 2. Unfortunately, is a positive 12, so it does work. We're going to have to split it off into 2. So we have y minus 10 equals 12, and y minus 10 equals negative 12. And then again, just solve for both. Okay, these are like one-step equations, most of them. Okay, now we have to check. We're just going to plug it into this fancy thing over here. So we're going to plug 22 in for y. So 22 minus 10 over negative 2. So solve the grouping first. So 22 minus 10 is 12. So the absolute value of 12 is 12, right? Absolute value of anything is positive. So 12 over negative 2. 12 divided by negative 2 is 6. Negative 6, I'm sorry. So that means that this checks out. So 22 is one of our answers. And then try negative 2. Negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12. And then the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. So now do 12 divided by negative 2, which is also negative 6, which means both of them work. And yes, there will be times when they don't. So do check. Especially probably on a quiz or a test, because I would want to make sure you guys are checking. All right, we're not going to do 9. 10. Look at 10. We need to multiply each side by 9. Now, you see how it equals 0? 0 times 9, 0 times anything is 0. So this is going to be easier because we don't have to split it off twice. Look what happens if we split it off twice. Remember how we keep this the same? And then one is positive and one is negative? Well, there's no such thing as negative 0. That's the same thing as 0. So we only need to solve one equation. So I'm going to erase that. And we only need to solve this one. So minus 12. So 3a equals negative 12 divided by 3, and a equals 4, negative 4. And now we're going to check it. So we're going to plug negative 4 into this equation wherever we see a. So 3 times negative 4 plus 12 over 9 equals 0. Order of operations, we have to multiply first. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And then negative 12 plus 12 is 0. And the absolute value of 0 over 9 is just 0 over 9, which does equal 0. Remember, when the 0 is on top of the fraction, it always equals 0. So that's a true statement. So we just have one answer. Okay, number 11. This is 2 steps. Now look what's happening here. If it was just that, I'm covering up. Okay, let me go back one. Hang on. How do I do this? Oh no. Okay, give me a second. Oh my gosh. I don't know how I did this. Okay. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so this one, if you were to just look at this by itself, I'm going to cover up this 9. If it was just a negative 4, wouldn't we just divide by negative 4 to both sides and be done? And then move on, right? Then we split it into 2. But because of this 9, we need to subtract this first from both sides. So that cancels. And now we're left with negative 4 times the absolute value of c plus 10 equals negative 24. And now we divide. You have to do it in that order. Okay, so c plus 10 equals 6 because those two cancel, and negative 24 divided by negative 4 is a positive 6. Split them off into 2, and then just solve each equation. So minus 10 from both sides, you get negative 4 and negative 16. So now we check. Remember to plug it back into the original equation. So 9 minus 4 times, and we're going to plug negative 4 in for our c, plus 10, and we're only solving this side. We just want to make sure when we're finished with this side, it equals this side. So negative 4 plus 10 is 6. I just brought everything else down. This, and then that equals 6. The absolute value of 6 is 6. And then we just multiply those two. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. And then we do 9 minus 24, which is negative 15. Now I'm going to try negative 16 and plug it in here for A. For C. And then we do the same thing. So negative 16 plus 10 is negative 6. The absolute value of negative 6 is 6 because it always comes out positive. Now we're going to multiply those two and we get negative 24, and that also equals negative 15. So our answers are negative 16 and negative 4. And notice I've been putting the smallest answer first. That is the proper way to write it. You need to write the smallest number. Negative 16 is smaller than negative 4, so write it like that. Just a couple more. So 12. Again, see how this is multiplying and then you have an adding thing, just like here we had to subtract 9 first and then we divided. We have to subtract 8 first to both sides and then we can divide by negative 12. So minus 8 to both sides, that cancels out. And then you combine these. Negative 16 minus 8 is negative 24. You bring this down and that cancels. So this is negative 12 times this whole fraction. So we're going to divide each side by negative 12, and that cancels out. Negative 24 divided by negative 12 is a positive 2. So 2 equals k over 5. Now we can split it off. 1 is just the same thing. 1 has a negative 2 equals k over 5. Now, if this is division and we're crossing the equal sign, the opposite of division here is just multiplication. So just multiply 5 to both sides. That cancels, and then we're left with 10 equals k. And then we multiply each side by 5, and then 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So now we do the fun stuff and we check. So let's plug in. So, let me go back. You see there's a k there? I literally copied this equation here. We're plugging 10 into that k. And now we're solving. So start with the grouping symbols. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Everything else stays the same. I brought down the 16. I brought down the negative 12. 10 divided by 12 is 2. Sorry, 10 divided by 5 is 2. 10 divided by 12 is not 2. 8, bring down the 8. And then here we can just multiply because the absolute value of 2 is 2. So negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. And then we simplify that, which is negative 16. Cool, that checks out. Now we're going to try negative 10. And if you think logically, think if you plug in a negative 10 here. If you plug in a negative 10, wouldn't that just be negative 10 divided by 5, which would be negative 2? And the absolute value of any negative is positive, right? So it would be negative 12 times positive 2. It would be the same thing. If you have the same numbers and they're both being put in absolute values and they're just opposite signs, it's going to be the same answer, but I'll write it out just in case you wanted to see it. Oh my gosh. Hang on. Let me put negative. Okay, negative, and then that would be negative, which would just be a positive. When you take the absolute value, it would be negative 12 times 2, which is still negative 24, so it checks out. All right, so both of those are answers. All right, number 13. Okay. You know what? Let's skip 13. And I don't know how to do it other than this. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to skip 13. And we're going to go to 14. So I'm just going to cross this one out. Don't worry about that one, because I didn't give you any homework problems on that. Anyways, okay. So on this one, we need to get the absolute value alone. So we're going to divide each side by 2. That cancels. We have h plus 8 equals 7h. And then we're going to split each one off. Now, 1, again, this always stays the same. And then 1 is positive and 1 is the negative 7h. Now this time we have h's on this side, so when we move things to the other side, we're not subtracting 8 because we need to combine the h's. We're subtracting h so we can get that together. All right, so we have 4/3 equals h. Okay, minus h, that cancels. 8 equals negative 8h, and then divide each side by negative 8, and then negative 1 equals h. Now, hopefully you understood what I did here. I divided by 6, and then I simplified by dividing the top and bottom by 2. That's my fraction. Now, the funnest part about this is now we have to check, which means we have to plug it back in. So, notice how there's an h, first of all, on both sides. We're plugging it into here and here. So, we have to figure this thing out. How in the world do you do this? Well, let's put the 8 over 1, okay? And I need to get common denominators. So in order for me to have a 3 here, because it was just 8 over 1 before, so that we can combine these, I need to multiply 3 to the top and bottom. So when I multiply 3 to the top and bottom, that's 8 times 3 is 24, and 1 times 3 is 3. Now we add the top of the fractions, and we keep the denominators the same when we're adding. So 4 plus 24 is 28 over 3. Now I know it was absolute value, but the absolute value of a positive number is positive, so I just changed it to a parentheses. Now I need to multiply these guys. So I'm going to put the 2 over 1, and now, because when we add, we need common denominators. When we multiply, we just multiply the top and the bottom. We can't cross-cancel at all. Nothing simplifies. So 2 times 28 is 56, and 1 times 3 is 3. All right, and then we have to see if this side also equals 56 over 3. So I'm going to put the 14 over 1 and 4 over 3. Again, I can't cross cancel, so let's just multiply. 14 times 4 is 56, and 1 times 3 is 3. So guess what? That checks out. So that means one of your answers is 4 over 3. Now let's try negative 1. Isn't this easier? Negative 1 plus 8 is 7, so 2. Okay, so 2, and then that's 7. 2 times 7 is 14. But look here. When you plug in 14 times negative 1, it's a negative 14. This doesn't check out. See how important it is to check your answers? So that's called an extraneous solution, which means your only answer is the set of 4 over 3. All right, we're not going to do 16. So let's just do 15 and be done. All right, we're going to add 5. Oh, never mind. I changed my mind. So we're not going to do 15. So we didn't have to do 13, 15, and 16. And then I need you guys to do the practice. There's a few you do not have to do. It should be written on the board. And so at least start the practice, but I think you can finish it because the other lesson wasn't too long. So go ahead and start that, and then we'll check it together on Wednesday.